vitamin D test. So got the little punch thing here, sort of turn it around like that until you twist it off. So you throw that away, you're left with this. So, that's going to wipe it down. They do encourage you to press through to here, press along here, to get the blood moving in that direction. Okay, so I'm just going to take this white thing off. The blood collector already, which is this little thing here. I'll keep it sterile for a moment. So, like this probably would have been easier just to get it to go and get some other alcohol. So I'll do both tips just in case I need more blood, and just in case. Ready to go. And there's the blood coming out. And that pretty much has come up to that red mark, all the blood. Let's bleed that. Stop the bleeding. This little device, we've got that little part there, the S, where the blood goes. So put all the blood in there, into the S. Then there's fluid, which is at the bottom one, you have to put it in. 2 drops. So got the 2 drops there, done that. And now I'll just leave this, and that was that bottom one there. The B, it's called the B number. And I just leave that and the blood will flow through. You can actually see the blood flowing through there. So the B is the bottom one with the fluid, and that fluid forces the blood to flow through. So it's flowing through now. As you can see, the blood coming through this little thing here. So until it actually gets to the other end, I'm going to go and stop the bleeding. And basically pause this for a second, then it will come back. And this was 5:17. So at 5:17 at 27 minutes past 5, that's when I'll basically, look at the results of that, because you need 10 minutes. So I'll be back. I'll just pause, and now while I'm waiting, we'll actually look at the actual, the sort of levels, which is important. So deficient is when both these ones are showing. It means you're deficient. So if you get that the T and the C and the T being very, if they're very bright, both of them, you're very deficient. If you're basically, the T is a bit lighter, then it means that you're basically, you're not as that deficient. Well, you're still deficient, but you're not. And then the next one up is insufficient. And you can see there the T's are much lighter for insufficiency. So when you've got the T much lighter, it means you're insufficient. But you can still see it. And sufficient is when you can hardly see. Now, there's a big range, 30 to 100 nanograms, 75 to 250 millimoles. Really, you don't really know where you're at in that regard. And that's fairly light there. As you can see, you can just barely see it. And that means you're in that sufficient range. If you can hardly see it, you're probably at the top of that. If you can just barely see it, if you can just see it a bit, you're probably at further down. Where exactly? Hard to say, because it's, these are range ones, are not specific like you would get with a regular proper instrument, which is a bit more expensive. But this is also cheap. It gives you a general guide whether you win it, whether you, at least you've got enough, or I think 30 is actually should be in the insufficiency range, not in the sufficient range. I think it should be from 40 onwards, and that's my personal opinion. And there's a lot of out there research which seems to indicate that that is a much better level to be at. But anyway, that's what the boffins have said. Now, excess, you basically get nothing in the T. You just get a really dark C line and absolutely nothing showing in the T. It means you're over 100 nanograms or 250. Now, yes, in a diet with insufficient retinol, with insufficient menaquinone 4, yes, it could be a problem. With sufficient retinol and sufficient menaquinone 4, it'd be fine. Now, if my result comes up as being in the excess, I'll knock back my vitamin D levels. I'll basically stop taking vitamin D, which I'm taking about 5,000 IUs currently because of the COVID situation, primarily. That's what it is. But if it basically drops, I'll basically pull back because I don't need to be that high. I'll just pull back because I've got enough stored, and then I'll basically look at the result in about a month's time and do another check to see, am I back to that lower level? If I am, fine. I'll be happy with that. So that's basically what I'm looking at. I've still got another 2 minutes to go before I can actually look at it. So what we'll do, we'll pause and then we'll come back to looking at that result. So let me stop the sharing. And I'll pause and then we'll come back. Anyway, we're at that time. So that's my result. You can actually barely, there's like, it's really hard off the camera, but when I actually look at it really close, there's like incredibly faint, but you can hardly see it. So I'm probably right at the top, maybe just a bit over into the excess. Because you can, now that shows completely white. That shows really, it's hard because it's really hard to see it. With a camera, it's impossible. Just with the naked eye, I can just barely see, and that's only very little in that regard. But I suspect I'm very high at the excess or close to it at the top end of the sufficient, and maybe what they consider. I'm not concerned whatsoever. I'll tell you, I'm not concerned in that regard. And basically, I'll ease off taking any vitamin D for the time being for a month, see whether I pop back down. Then I'll basically go back to taking 5,000 IUs every day, and then I'll check to see what happens after that and see whether there's any change or it's just remained the same, which just will then confirm that everything's a-okay, so to speak. But at this stage, you know, maybe, but it's barely noticeable. You have to really look close to see whether you can actually see it. You can just barely see a faint. Now, so it's not completely white, but I suspect I'm probably very high to the 100 nanograms, which is 250 millimoles, very close to that. But I'm feeling fine, you know. I've got no, and it's probably because my vitamin D levels are so bloody high. Why in the last couple of months, a lot of things that I had, like pain, you know, joint pain that I had, my injury and stuff like that, that wasn't really healing enough, quick enough and all that, seems to, since I went up to, you know, from 5,000 to 10,000 I use continuously for basically also the C19 issue. And what I did notice is by doing that, nothing, absolutely nothing in that regard. So that whole issue seemed to basically evaporate. So it just seems like it's done the sort of trick in terms of my pain in my knees and stuff like that. That's all gone. I was COVID proof completely, you know, exposed multiple times, and I've had other people, you know, get it the second time. I mean, the same lady got it again. So, you know, and I've been negative again. So I'm saying to myself, and brother as well has been negative again. And then she was basically, it's only a couple of days and she was out of that because she's been taking, also bumped up her vitamin D and taurine levels. So yeah, I'm more than happy. I will knock it back because I know now that I'm at that high level, I'm confident that I've got good levels of vitamin D for C19 protection. So I'm not concerned about that. I'll just bring it down to the normal again by just cutting out for a month. And then that will definitely drop me because at the moment, Tasmania's been a bit, the weather-wise, it hasn't been that hot. You know, we're in the low 20s. We've got a lot of overcast. There's not as intense UV. So under those sort of circumstances, I should drop back. And probably I didn't really need to supplement every day since I've been basically walking out in the sun. So, you know, it's probably a, and it was just more out of concern with the C19 going around. It's in regards to some of the research that I'm going to bring up and discuss about the aging of the immune system, and it's where my concerns have been, why I've been doing this sort of, you know, vitamin D exposure. But I am covering myself with retinol to balance things out, and I am covering myself with minoquinone 4 as well. So in that regard, and I'm getting sufficient dairy as well to cover the other side of, you know, any potential risk for the minoquinone in terms of serum calcium. So all that's been working pretty well. My defenses against C19 have been really good. So I'm happy with all that. Now, some people are going to say, well, Harry, you're in excess, you're toxic. I don't think so. I feel much better than I felt a couple of months ago when my vitamin D levels were probably lower. So I feel much better. And my bone pains and all that from my injury. Remember when I injured my leg jogging and stuff like that, I fell over. You know, it was taking a while to recover. It just wouldn't bloody recover. And I was getting really concerned. And then because of the C19 situation, I upped my vitamin D levels from 5,000 to 10,000 I used. And so, and I was going out in the sun and all that, but you know, you're an office worker as well. You get a certain level of exposure. Maybe I didn't need to because I was going out every lunchtime and getting exposure. And so probably I didn't need to supplement at all under those circumstances. Maybe I was getting enough. I am fair skinned, so I probably was getting enough under those circumstances. But look, it doesn't bother me. You know, the high levels together with a taurine is just maybe basically immune to C19. And I was more concerned about that. Since I'm covering the retinol from the diet, I'm getting more than enough retinol, and I'm getting more than enough minoquinone 4. So eggs and the animal fats, especially dairy fats, which are very high in retinol. So, and eggs, I was pretty much, and sometimes I'll do 6 eggs a day if I feel like it or more. Probably not as, probably Dad does more than me, does up to 8 sometimes. But yeah, so in that regard, I don't have a lot of concerns. But it was interesting to see where the results. Now, they're not precise results, okay? That's just giving you a, you know, how high in the excess is, don't know, have no idea. And if it was a problem, there would have been an issue with, and one thing that I'm comfortable with, taking high doses of taurine actually, it prevents any excess serum levels of calcium anyway. It will force an excretion of excess calcium out of the urine. And if you've basically got too little, it'll actually recycle and maintain more from the kidneys. So having enough, getting enough sort of taurine in my system, that's going to regulate calcium, the calcium channels, the calcium metabolism and the calcium channels. And I don't have any concerns on that front, really. And I feel much better. In the last months, I've been feeling much better. I've just been bulletproof. I've been walking around people that have been coughing left, right, and center. I mean, I'm not joking. You go to the supermarket, people, you know, it's constant, you know, because, you know, the latest strains of Omicron have been getting around. It's been visiting many homes. And as a consequence, you know, you go, but nothing, absolutely nothing, exposed, close to people, hugging people that have actually actively got it, you know, nothing whatsoever. So am I toxic? I don't think so. I think maintaining a healthy level of naive T cells, of a more youthful immune system due to vitamin D and taurine, I think is way more important than being a bit concerned, especially if you're on a species appropriate diet and you're getting enough taurine and some of the other important nutrients like minoquinone 4, you've got no real concerns. Because you could be out in the sun with fair skin and get up to 20,000 IUs per day. Okay, you can get up to 20,000 IUs directly from the sun. Now, maybe I was, you know, because I was getting out in the sun about 20,000 IUs, plus I was adding another 10,000, making that 30,000. Maybe what I was doing is 30,000 IUs all up continuously. And maybe that was just a bit too high. And that's why I'm getting these sort of results. And if I basically just focus on the sun for the next month and I eliminate the supplemental side, things should normalize. So that's what I suspect will happen. So I'm not too concerned about it. And I'll be reporting back in a month's time. So, and we'll see where I'm at that stage. So I'll do my last kit. I've got my last kit then, because I just realized I need to give that other kit to Dad, the other one. So yeah, I've got 2 kits. One goes to Dad because I have promised him. So yeah, so I'll basically just look at where I'm at. If I've come back down into that, I'm fine. I'm not going to worry. And then I don't, and that'll just mean that if I pop back down after a month, it means that I wasn't really in any excess, you know, extreme excess. And if I still haven't come down, I'll just stay off the vitamin D for another month and then get back on it because then by then it will be wintry, you know, by that month, because, you know, we're in April now. So end of April, we're in May. Pretty much we're talking about getting nearly into winter So at that stage, I will have to get back onto the vitamin D because there won't be much sun out there. So I suspect being off it, I'll have this really rapid drop back into the sufficiency range. And if it becomes a bit on the too darker side on the T, it means that I've probably dropped down too far. And at that stage, then I'll probably supplement for a week up to 50,000. I'll pop myself back up. I don't care if I'm that really high range of close to 100 nanograms, or, it just means that basically my D levels can access every single one of my genes. It means that I can regulate the entire genome that's influenced over 1,200 genes. So I'm less concerned, especially with enough taurine to regulate calcium and sufficient, metaquinone 4 to drive any what isn't taken out by the kidneys to drive it into the actual the bones, and the rest will sort itself out. And I've got enough retinol coming in from especially dairy fat because it's much higher in retinol. So are eggs. I consume both of those quite a bit. So I'm less concerned. I'm honestly less concerned. I feel great. So I don't have a real issue to worry about and all that. Everything's, fine. Probably the only thing that was a bit weird today was, normally I'll have, little poops about like that. I had about 3 or 4 of those. And I'm going, I don't remember eating too much the previous day. So yeah, maybe they didn't want to come out a bit earlier. So that was probably the only interesting thing, that I had more poop than I normally have. So maybe I was getting stressed about this test that was coming up, and I pooped everything out. It all went to shit. Anyway, we'll leave it at that. I hope you got a bit of an amusement out of my situation. Yes, I got the Band-Aid on. Yes, bled quite a bit. I shouldn't have actually forced it so far in the actual little pin. But anyway, I'll be a bit less vigorous next time on that front. See yous.